The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 13. Beyond Action and Reaction. Chapter 3. The Great Development of Associational Life. Everything assumes an increasingly associational form. A vast system of interlocking syndics, pleasure syndics, work syndics, sex and age syndics, vice and race syndics, health syndics, and valetudinarian syndics, is imposed. In Sodom et Gomorrah, Proust shows the working of this very well in his analysis of the powerful instinctive Freemasonry of the pederast. But the philatelist, the anti-Semite, the Rolsite, or the Daimlerite, the player of chess or of mahjong, can form equally well cemented brotherhoods. The associational habit in its present development is the result of mass production. It is fostered in the interests of economy in our overcrowded world, and people are encouraged to get as quickly as possible into the category that offers the nearest approach to what they require or what they can hope for, and there remain. The mass mind is required to gravitate to a standard size to receive the standard idea. The alternative is to go naked. The days of made to order and made to measure are past. The standardization of women's dress, which is affected by the absolutist machinery of fashion, is the type of all the other compulsions tending to a greater and greater uniformity and standardization. There a color nigger brown, for instance, is imposed. The great syndic of the manufacturers, dressmakers, etc., agree on nigger brown, and so the world flowers universally in nigger brown for a season, with perhaps a streak of mushroom pink exuvie from the last season. In the interest of great-scale industry and mass production, the smaller the margin of diversity the better. The nearer the fashion is to a uniform, the bigger the returns, the fewer dresses unsold, for where there is little difference in cut, color, and fancy there is the less temptation to be individualistically fussy. When there is so little essential difference between one costume and another, the difference is so slight it is not worth holding out about. This closer and closer regimentation of women, with the rhythmic seasonal changes of sex uniform, is effected without difficulty by simple fiats of fashion. The overpowering instinct for conformity, and the horror of antiquation or of the eccentric, sees to the rest. In all this vast smooth-running process you see the image of a political state in which no legislation, police, or any physical compulsion would be required, in which everything would be affected by public opinion, snobbery, and the magic of fashion. We have, historically, in the Hebrew state, a type of non-executive state such as might be arrived at on those lines. The legislature, of the Greek city-state sort, did not exist. Of all coercive administrative machinery, only the judiciary was required. God did the rest, or rather the teachings of righteousness, the anxious fanatical conscience of the citizen, and a great system of ritual. That is an example of moral rule, or rule by opinion, as opposed to rule by physical force, of much more effective interior, mental, domination, in place of a less intelligent exterior form of government. Theocratic and theurgic forms of government are the highest form of democracy, a kind of super-democracy, in fact. The ideas of a time are like the close of a season, they are as arbitrary, as much imposed by some superior will which is seldom explicit. They are utilitarian and political, the instruments of smooth-running government. And to criticize them seriously, especially today, for themselves, would be as absurd as to criticize the fashion in loofahs, bath mats, bath salts, or geysers, in children's frocks or soft felt hats. Those who actually like uniformity are naturally open to an unflattering suspicion. If, for instance, you protest too much that all men are much the same, does it not mean perhaps that you wish all men to be much the same? You have no hope of benefiting by a general recognition of their being otherwise? You see your interest best in a degradation of men, rather than in a belief in their potentialities and in the excelling of some? If you reply that I or another are similarly arguing for privilege or discrimination because we have a personal interest in such an arrangement, that would have to be accepted by us. There would be no dishonor in such a conclusion to the argument. At all events, that is the danger run by the person too emphatic for the uniform. Again, the physical size of a living organism at any given moment of time is of the same value as the size of a stone. A man 6 foot high and a stone 6 foot high are both 6 foot. But since the man is living, goes on, and multiplies himself in space, there is no meaning in comparing them in that way. By saying that the stone is alive, only living slower, you do not alter the matter on our plane, which is alone the plane on which we are conscious, and about which we are talking. Outward uniformity is highly deceptive in any case. The associational herd instinct has one peculiarity that is very much to the point. The higher up in the scale of intelligence and vitality people are found, the less do they care, or are they able, to associate with each other and lend each other help. The inherent weakness of this natural isolation is the cause of all human misfortune, since the inventive individual is constantly exposed to destruction in a way that the uninventive, mechanical, associational man is not. Had the best intelligences at any time in the world been able to combine, the result would have been a prodigy of power, and the result for men at large of the happiest. What makes the present time, then, so hopeful a one is that in the ever closer and more mechanical association of the great masses of people into an ever more and more rigid system of clans, societies, clubs, syndics, and classes, the original man is more and more forced out of these groupings, since there is no play for the inventive or independent mind within them. All these odd men outstand at present glaring at each other as usual, remarking perhaps to themselves that adversity brings them strange bedfellows. But the time must arrive when they, too, in spite of themselves, form a sort of syndic. That will be the moment of the renaissance of our race, or will be the signal for a new biological transformation. While the philosopher of the sort of Mr. Russell, of the author of The Anatomy of Melancholy, or of Professor Richer, would be swept down into the underworld of subconscious automatism, wringing their hands, in attitudes of apocalyptic despair. Earlier in this essay it was remarked that, left at the mercy of this vast average, its inertia, creative hatred, and conspiratorial habits where the new is concerned, we shall always checkmate ourselves, and the more we advance, the more we shall lose ground. But if this inertia, 1, is satisfied by a businesslike organization of its desire, it's what the public wants requirement, and if, 2, this inflexible organization severs it entirely from all the free intelligences in the world, which it more and more isolates, then a new duality of human life, introducing perhaps a new species, and issuing in biological transformation, would result. That is why, far from molesting or subjecting to damaging criticism, of a vulgarizing description, the processes of stultification which are occurring, everything should be done, publicly, and at large, of course, to hasten it. So it can be truly said with fullest good sense that whenever you see a particularly foolish play, read an especially idiotic article, full of that strident humbug to which we are so accustomed, you should rejoice. Mental food changes people in the same way as what they eat and the climate of their habitat. Those who like or can stomach what they are given in Western democracies today will change and separate themselves naturally from those who reject or vomit at that fare. A natural separation will then occur, and everybody will get what he wants. Nature's ethereal, human angel, man, will become segmented, and the divorce will be to the good of both these sections which are being forced apart.